Outlaws confront a rancher's daughter, unaware she's deadlier than her father. Because here's the thing about Thunder Creek Valley. It wasn't just about land. Sarah had seen the patterns, the strategic location, the old mining tunnels, in proximity to the Canadian border. Kane wasn't building vacation homes. He was building something else, something that would have made her old unit very interested. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. That evening, as storm clouds gathered over the Bitterroots, Sarah retreated to her workshop, a converted tool shed that James never entered. Behind a false panel of pegboard, she'd installed a command center that would have made her old unit proud. Multiple screens showed camera feeds from across the property, while an encrypted laptop maintained connection with satellites that officially didn't track this region. Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard, documenting Kane's patterns. His men were getting bolder, pushing closer to the property lines after dark, testing responses, looking for weaknesses. The thermal imaging showed their patrols had doubled in the past week, with particular interest in the old Whitaker mine entrance on the North Ridge. But that's not all. Sarah pulled up geological surveys of the area, the kind not available to the public. Thunder Creek Valley wasn't just ranch land. It was a maze of abandoned mining tunnels, some dating back to the 1800s, perfect for moving things across borders, undetected. The kind of things that would interest her former employers at the NSA's Special Collection Service. The screen flickered as a new alert popped up. One of Kane's SUVs was parked behind Miller's barn, two men in tactical gear unloading. Equipment. Sarah zoomed in, her breath catching. Those weren't construction tools. The cases had military markings, the same ones she'd seen in certain parts of Eastern Europe, where questions weren't welcome. A knock at the workshop door made her freeze. "Sarah?" James called out. "Got a call from the bank. They're saying, our loan review's been moved up. Something about regulatory concerns." Sarah quickly switched her screens to a YouTube video about fence repair. "Be right there, Dad." She grabbed her tools, maintaining her cover, but her mind was already formulating contingencies. Kane wasn't just trying to buy the valley. He was setting up an operation, one that would make him millions moving cargo through the old mines, using legitimate business as cover. Thunder Creek Ranch wasn't just her home anymore. It was now her operation zone, and she hadn't spent 8 years in the shadows tracking similar operations across 3 continents to let some wannabe crime boss steal her father's legacy. The war for Thunder Creek was about to begin, and Marcus Kane was about to learn that sometimes the deadliest predators are the ones hiding in plain sight. Because while he saw a simple rancher's daughter, Sarah saw something else. Her chance to protect not just her family's land, but the entire valley from becoming another criminal pipeline into the heartland. She looked at her father's worried face as she stepped out of the workshop. James Blackwood had raised her alone after her mother's death, teaching her everything about running a ranch. But he never knew about the other skills she'd learned, the ones that had earned her a reputation in circles where real names were never used. Now those two worlds were about to collide, and Sarah would need every lesson from both to save what mattered most. The next morning brought trouble to Thunder Creek, faster than storm clouds rolling off the Bitterroots. Sarah was checking the irrigation system when she spotted 3 of Kane's men hassling old Tom Henderson at his gas station on the edge of town. But this wasn't just routine intimidation. She recognized their stance, the way they positioned themselves. They were running a tactical interrogation in broad daylight. "Your granddaughter is still working that hospital night shift in Missoula?" one of them asked, leaning too close to Tom's weathered face. "Long drive home, dark roads, lots of wildlife this time of year." Sarah pulled her truck into the station, deliberately letting the engine run rough. Her boots hit the gravel with practiced weight, not too heavy, not too light, just another rancher stopping for gas. But her eyes caught everything. The unmarked pistol poorly concealed under the leader's jacket, the radio earpiece the second man was trying to hide with a cowboy hat, the way the third kept his hand near his back pocket. "Tom!" she called out. Cheerfully, "Dad's looking for that special fuel additive you got him last month. Got any more in stock?" The thugs stepped back, trying to look casual. Sarah noted how the leader favored his left leg slightly. Old injury, probably knee. The second man's hands were soft, a tech guy playing enforcer. The third had military boots under his designer jeans. Sloppy. "Sure thing, Sarah." Tom's voice shook slightly. "Let me check the back." But that's not all. As Tom disappeared into the store, Sarah caught a glimpse of papers on his counter, bank documents, loan assessments, and a letter with Crown Valley Development's Scorpion logo. The same pattern she'd seen at Miller's place. Financial warfare before the real pressure began. "Miss Blackwood," the leader smiled, all fake charm now. "Jake Williams, Mr. Kane's associate, just having a friendly business discussion." Sarah kept her posture relaxed, but her mind calculated angles, distances, potential weapons. 3 fire extinguishers within reach, oil displays that could block their sight lines, metal rack that could work as a cover. Funny kind of business. "Involves threatening people's families," she said, voice mild as Montana sunshine. The leader, Williams, flinched slightly. He hadn't mentioned the granddaughter's threat where she could hear. "Amateur mistake, just explaining market realities," Williams recovered. "Times are changing. Smart folks adapt." Sarah leaned against her truck, a move that incidentally gave her better access to the knife hidden at her lower back. "You know what? Hasn't changed. Montana law about criminal threatening. Sheriff Burke might be interested in that." Williams laughed, but his eyes darted to his companions. "Sheriff's a reasonable man. Understand progress." "Does he understand what happens to law enforcement who take bribes in federal jurisdiction cases?" Sarah asked innocently. Another flinch. "Because last I checked, Thunder Creek Valley falls under cross-border monitoring. Lots of agencies get nervous about development near the Canadian line." The shift in Williams's stance was subtle, but Sarah caught it. He didn't expect a rancher's daughter to know about federal jurisdiction zones. His hand twitched toward his. "Concealed weapon, that's an awful lot of legal knowledge for someone who just works cattle," he said softly. Sarah shrugged. "YouTube's great for learning all sorts of things, like how to spot an illegal concealed carry stance, or identify private military contractors playing cowboy." The third man stepped forward, but Williams held up a hand. Sarah had rattled them, not enough to back off completely, but enough to make them sloppy. "Perfect." Tom returned with the fuel. Additive, his hands steadier now. Sarah paid in cash, noting how Williams kept checking his phone, probably calling in her comments to Kane. Good. Let them start digging. They wouldn't find anything under her official records. But here's where it gets interesting. As Sarah drove away, she activated the small receiver she'd planted at the gas station weeks ago. Williams's voice crackled through her truck's hidden speaker. "Boss, we got a problem. The Blackwood girl. Something's off. She made us. Knew things she shouldn't. Yeah, I know she's just some ranch kid, but no, sir, not backing down. Just think we should—" "Yes, sir. Understood." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Phase 1 complete. Let them. No, she wasn't as simple as she seemed. Make them nervous, make them dig. Because while they wasted resources investigating her public background, they'd miss the real threat hiding beneath the surface. She pulled over at Miller's place, where the old rancher was struggling with a broken tractor. The same tractor that had been running fine yesterday before Kane's men paid him a visit. "Sugar in the gas tank," Miller spat. "Cowards won't face you straight on." Sarah examined the engine, her mind already forming patterns. Kane's crew had hit 3 ranches this week. First equipment damage. then mysterious accidents, finally financial pressure, classic destabilization tactics. But they weren't just softening up targets for land grabs anymore. The cases she'd spotted at the gas station confirmed her suspicions. Weapons and tech coming down from Canada, drugs going back up, using the valley's old mines as a smuggling highway. "I'll help you fix it," Sarah told Miller, already reaching for her tools. But as she worked, her satellite phone buzzed with a message from a number that officially didn't exist. Package confirmed at border, high-value tech, players from old Belgrade op involved. "Watch your six," Sarah's jaw tightened. Belgrade. That operation had ended with 3 dead agents and a human trafficking ring, using corporate fronts for weapons distribution. Now the same players were setting up shop in her valley, thinking they'd found another quiet route to exploit. They thought wrong. Thunder Creek wasn't just her home, it was her new mission, and Sarah Blackwood hadn't earned her classified reputation by letting threats grow unchecked. As if reading her thoughts, Miller spoke quietly. "They're hitting the diner tonight. Kane's boys made sure Lucy knew they were coming, said they needed to discuss her late loan payments. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." Sarah nodded, keeping her voice casual. "Might stop by for coffee then. Been craving Lucy's apple pie?" But her mind was already running tactical scenarios. The diner had 3 exits, clear sight lines from the corner, a booth, and a kitchen full of potential distractions. Plus, she'd already mapped every camera in town that Kane's tech guy had compromised. Time to give them a show, just enough to shake their confidence, not enough to show her full hand. Thunder Creek was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous predator isn't the one making threats. It's the one waiting patiently in the shadows, letting the enemy's arrogance become their weakness. Because here's the truth about Sarah Blackwood. While Kane saw a simple rancher's daughter, she saw his operation for what it was, a chance to finish what Belgrade started. And this time, she had home field advantage. Later that afternoon, Sarah made her way to Lucy's diner, arriving early to set the stage. She chose her usual booth, the one with the clearest view of both entrances and the kitchen. Her father's old Carhartt jacket concealed more than just ranch dust today. Lucy, a woman who'd known Sarah since she was knee-high to a grasshopper, brought coffee without being asked. Her hands trembled slightly as she set down the cup. "They called again," Lucy whispered. "Said they're sending someone important. Someone who needs to see how cooperative the local businesses can be." Sarah sipped her coffee, noting the black SUV that just parked across the street. "What time?" 6. Lucy's voice cracked. "Sarah, I can't lose this place. It's all I have since Bob passed." Sarah reached out, squeezed Lucy's hand. "Remember when I was 12 and those boys from Helena were hassling me about Mom's death? Remember what you did?" Lucy's face softened at the memory. "Chased them out with a rolling pin." "You taught me something that day," Sarah said quietly. "Sometimes the best defense is making them realize they picked the wrong target." As the afternoon light faded into dusk, more players arrived. 2 of Kane's men took up positions at the counter. A third sat in a corner, pretending to read a newspaper. Sarah recognized him from her intelligence briefings years ago. Ex-military, dishonorable discharge, known associate of weapons traffickers in Eastern Europe. But the real surprise came at 5:55 p.m. Sarah's blood ran cold as she recognized the man in the expensive suit. Anton Kovac. He'd been a ghost in the Belgrade operation, always one step ahead. Now he was here, in her town, probably running the Canadian supply line for Kane's operation. Kovac's eyes swept the diner, pausing briefly on Sarah. She kept her posture relaxed, playing with her phone like any other young rancher killing time. But beneath the table, her other hand was already moving. "Miss Warner." Kovac addressed Lucy, his accent carefully smoothed but still present. "We should discuss the future of this charming establishment." Lucy started to respond, but the diner's power cut out. Emergency lights kicked in, casting everything in a dim red glow. In the confusion, Sarah's fingers flew across her phone, sending a pre-programmed signal. Across town, every compromised security camera suddenly began streaming to a very interested federal task force. "Minor inconvenience," Kovac smiled, but Sarah saw his hand slip inside his jacket. "Now, about your loan." The diner's landline rang. Lucy answered, her face confused. It's for you, Mr. Kovac. They say it's urgent." Sarah watched Kovac's face as he took the phone. Watched the color drain from it as a voice from Sarah's past delivered a very specific message about very specific accounts being monitored. "Problems?" Sarah asked innocently, standing to leave. As she passed Kovac, she whispered in flawless Serbian, "Belgrade says hello." The look of shock on his face was worth years of deep cover, worth every scar and nightmare, worth maintaining. A simple rancher's daughter facade, because that's the thing about predators. They get careless when they think they're at the top of the food chain. They forget that sometimes the most dangerous hunters are the ones who know how to play prey. As Sarah drove home, her satellite phone buzzed again. Kovac confirmed. "Task force moving up timeline. Stand by for instructions." The war for Thunder Creek was escalating, and Sarah Blackwood was finally ready to show them exactly why she'd been chosen for the Belgrade operation in the first place. Finish what Belgrade started, and this time she had home field advantage. Sarah's confrontation with Kovac at the diner sent ripples through Thunder Creek Valley faster than a summer wildfire. By sunrise, Kane's operation had shifted from subtle pressure to open aggression. 3 more ranches reported equipment sabotage. The local bank suddenly froze several accounts for routine audits, and Sheriff Burke's patrol car seemed to appear wherever trouble wasn't. But that's not all. Sarah's surveillance network picked up increased activity around the old mine entrances. Heavy equipment moving under cover of darkness, new security systems being installed, the kind of gear that didn't come from your local hardware store. "They're accelerating their timeline," Sarah muttered, reviewing the footage in her workshop. The thermal imaging showed teams working round the clock, reinforcing tunnel supports, installing industrial ventilation. Whatever they were planning, to move through Thunder Creek, it was big. Her satellite phone buzzed. "Intel confirms. Major shipment incoming." 72 hours. Sarah's jaw tightened. 3 days. Not enough time for the federal task force to mobilize without risking civilian casualties. Kane's crew would have escape routes planned through every mine shaft and mountain pass, and with a corrupt sheriff in his pocket, any official response would be compromised before it began. But listen to this. As Sarah drove into town for supplies, she noticed something else. The locals were fighting back in their own way. Tom's gas station had mysteriously run dry, just as Kane's vehicles needed refueling. The grocery store was suddenly out of everything Kane's men typically ordered. Small acts of defiance, but they showed the valley's spirit wasn't broken. At the feed store, Sarah ran into her father's old friend, Mike Running Bear. The former tribal police officer had been watching Kane's operation with growing concern. "Your father says you've been asking about the old hunting trails," Mike said quietly, pretending to examine feed bags. "The ones that cross the reservation land." Sarah nodded, keeping her voice casual. "Always good to know your escape routes." Mike's eyes held hers. "Those trails, they connect to places the mining companies never found, places my grandfather used to call the shadow paths." Sarah's pulse quickened. Underground routes that weren't on any official maps. Routes that could let her outflank Kane's operation. "Shame about your security cameras getting vandalized," Sarah said, loud enough for others to hear. But her hand slipped Mike a small package, a military-grade motion sensor. "Might want to upgrade." Mike nodded, understanding. By sunset, Sarah's surveillance network would have eyes on routes even Kane didn't know existed. But here's where it gets interesting. As Sarah loaded supplies into her truck, she spotted Williams, Kane's right-hand man, having an intense conversation with someone in a government vehicle. The tinted windows obscured the occupant, but Sarah's directional microphone caught. Fragments. Federal investigation can't guarantee containment. Blackwood girl knows something. So they were finally starting to dig. Good. Let them waste resources investigating her public background. They'd find nothing but a rancher's daughter who'd spent 4 years in the Army Corps of Engineers before coming home to help her father. The perfect cover story, because it was true, as far as anyone could prove. What they wouldn't find was her real military record. The classified operations, the specialized training, the network of contacts that had earned her the codename Ghost Horse, a name that still made certain people in Belgrade wake up sweating. Sarah's phone buzzed again, a message from Lucy. They're back. Different men this time, professional, asking questions about you. Time to change the game. Sarah drove to the diner, but this time she wasn't playing defense. As she entered, she counted 4 men in civilian clothes who screamed federal agent. Gaines people watching them. And in the corner, a face she recognized from her Belgrade days, Anna Petrovich, now working for Interpol's organized crime unit. Sarah ordered coffee, making sure to spill some on her worn ranch clothes. Clumsy, harmless. But as she passed Anna's table, she whispered in Croatian, "The caves run deeper than their maps show." Anna's hand tightened on her cup, but she didn't react otherwise. Good. The message would reach the right people. Local law enforcement was compromised. But there were other options. Options that wouldn't appear in any official response plan. Back at the ranch, Sarah found her father at the kitchen table, studying property maps. James Blackwood's face was drawn with worry. Kane's people filed permits for the North Ridge, he said. Emergency mining surveys. They're trying to claim mineral rights. Sarah examined the maps, her tactical mind seeing what her father couldn't. The permits were a smokescreen. Kane wasn't interested in minerals. He was establishing legal cover for the massive operation about to unfold beneath Thunder Creek Valley. "Dad," Sarah said carefully, "remember how Mom always said sometimes you have to lose a little to win the war?" James looked up sharply. Sarah had never mentioned her mother's military service, never revealed that Catherine Blackwood's accounting job had involved tracking black money for an NSA task force. "Your mother," James said slowly, "had a way of seeing the bigger picture." Sarah nodded. "Kane thinks he's fighting for land. But this valley, it's not just about property rights anymore." A distant explosion made them both jump. Sarah's phone immediately lit up with alerts. Kane's crew had blown one of the old mine entrances, claiming safety concerns. But Sarah's cameras caught what the public wouldn't see: teams of armed men moving equipment under the cover of dust and debris. "Things are about to get complicated," Sarah told her father. "Whatever happens, whatever you hear about me, remember that everything I've done, everything I'm going to do, is to protect what matters." James studied his daughter's face, seeing perhaps for the first time the steel beneath the rancher's calm. "Your mother would be proud," he said simply. Sarah squeezed his hand, then headed to her workshop. The time for playing defense was over. Kane thought he was dealing with a simple rancher's daughter. He was about to learn that sometimes the deadliest predators are the ones who know how to hide in plain sight. Because here's the truth about Thunder Creek Valley. It wasn't just about land or money or power anymore. It was about drawing a line. And Sarah Blackwood had spent her entire career making sure that when lines were drawn, the enemy never saw the trap until it was too late. 3 days. 72 hours to stop an international weapons smuggling operation, protect her community, and ensure Kane's crew learned a permanent lesson about underestimating ranch country. The war for Thunder Creek was about to enter its final phase, and Sarah Blackwood was finally ready to show them exactly why she'd earned her reputation as the ghost no one saw coming. Later that night, Sarah slipped into her workshop, activating the secure terminal hidden behind the workbench. The screens came alive with real-time data from her sensor network. Kane's operation was moving faster than expected. Thermal imaging showed teams working through the night, reinforcing tunnel supports and installing industrial-grade ventilation systems. But something else caught her attention. The pattern of movement suggested they weren't just preparing for weapons shipments. The infrastructure they were installing, the power requirements, the specific equipment being moved in, it pointed to something bigger. Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard, cross-referencing data from her Belgrade days. The pieces started falling into place. High-grade electronics, specialized cooling systems, the same signatures she'd seen in operations involving experimental tech trafficking. Her satellite phone lit up with a message from an old contact. Warning. Prototype weapon system confirmed. Same design from Belgrade. Demonstration for buyers in 72 hours. Sarah's blood ran cold. The Belgrade prototype, a next-generation targeting system that could turn any civilian drone into a precision weapon. The kind of tech that could destabilize entire regions if it fell into the wrong hands. As if confirming her fears, another explosion rocked the valley. This time, Sarah's cameras caught more than just dust and debris. Through the thermal imaging, she saw teams moving what looked like server racks into the newly secured mine entrance. They're not just using Thunder Creek for transport, she muttered. They're setting up a testing ground. Sarah pulled up the topographical maps Mike had provided. The old tribal hunting trails didn't just connect to forgotten caves. They formed a natural network that could let her infiltrate Kane's operation from angles his security systems wouldn't cover. Her father's footsteps on the workshop stairs made her quickly switch screens. James entered, his face grim. "Just got word from Miller's place," he said. "Kane's men are setting up some kind of equipment on the ridge. Says it looks military." Sarah nodded, her mind already formulating plans. "Dad, remember those survival caches Mum used to insist we maintain? The ones in the high country?" James's eyes widened slightly. Those caches weren't just survival gear, they were his late wife's insurance policy, containing everything from weapons to communications equipment. Equipment that would let Sarah coordinate with federal forces without risking compromised channels. "Might be time to check if they're still good," she said carefully. James studied her for a long moment. "Your mother always said there'd come a day when the past would catch up. Guess she wasn't just talking about her own." Sarah's throat tightened. "Dad, what I'm about to do," he held up a hand. "Catherine Blackwood didn't raise a daughter who'd stand by while people threatened her home. Just come back safe." Sarah hugged him, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and hay. When she pulled back, her eyes were steel. 3 days. After that, Kane's going to learn why Mom always said the most dangerous predators are the ones who know how to wait. But that's not all. As Sarah prepared to leave, her secure terminal lit up with new alerts. The thermal imaging showed a convoy of vehicles approaching from the north, high-end SUVs and what looked like modified military transport trucks, the kind used for moving sensitive equipment. "Multiple teams deploying," her contact messaged. "Buyers arriving early. Test demonstration moved up. 48 hours. Sarah cursed under her breath. The timeline had just been cut by a full day. Through her surveillance network, she watched Kane's operation kick into high gear. More equipment is being moved into the mines. Armed teams establishing perimeter security. And something else. Civilian drones being unpacked and modified with hardware she recognized from the Belgrade files. They weren't just planning a demonstration. They were setting up a full field test of the prototype system and Thunder Creek. Valley, with its isolated location and compromised law enforcement, was the perfect testing ground. Sarah pulled up satellite imagery of the surrounding mountains. The tribal hunting trails Mike had shown her didn't just provide access to the mines, they offered perfect vantage points for someone who knew how to move unseen, points where a single operative could disrupt an entire operation. Her mother's survival caches would have everything she needed: specialized equipment, weapons, and most importantly, a secure communication system that could coordinate with federal forces without detection. Catherine Blackwood had planned for everything, including the day her daughter might need to fight the same kind of battles she once had. Sarah began downloading the latest surveillance data to her encrypted devices. The next 48 hours would require every skill she'd learned, both as a rancher's daughter and as the operative codenamed Ghost Horse. Kane thought he was dealing with a simple local resistance. He was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one who knows both the land and the shadows. Because here's the truth about Thunder Creek Valley. It wasn't just about protecting a ranch anymore. It was about stopping a weapons system that could turn everyday technology into tools of war. And Sarah Blackwood hadn't survived Belgrade just to let that kind of threat take root in her own backyard. The clock was ticking. 48 hours to infiltrate a heavily guarded operation, prevent an illegal weapons test, and ensure that Thunder Creek Valley remained exactly what it had always been, a place where people like Kane learned the hard way that some lines shouldn't be crossed. Dawn broke over Thunder Creek Valley with an eerie calm. Sarah had spent the night accessing her mother's survival caches, retrieving equipment that hadn't seen use since Catherine Blackwood's days tracking black money across international borders. The secure satellite phone, tactical gear, and weapons were exactly where they should be, preserved in vacuum-sealed containers with military precision. But that's not all. The caches contained something else. Detailed maps of the valley's cave system, annotated in her mother's careful handwriting. Catherine hadn't just been preparing for emergencies. She'd been mapping potential operation zones. Sarah's tactical watch showed 47 hours until Kane's weapon demonstration. Through her surveillance network, she watched more vehicles arrive, unmarked vans carrying what looked like modified server equipment, teams of technicians in civilian clothes, but military postures. Multiple high-value targets confirmed. Her contact messaged, buyers from Eastern Europe, South America, former Belgrade connections. Sarah's jaw tightened as she recognized one particular face from her thermal imaging feeds. Viktor Petrov, arms dealer, technology broker, and the man responsible for 3 dead agents in Belgrade. He'd escaped the dragnet then. Now he was, here in her valley, probably coordinating the buyer side of Kane's operation. A truck engine rumbled in the distance. Sarah melted into the underbrush, her mother's old ghillie suit blending perfectly with the Montana terrain. Kane's security team passed below, escorting what looked like environmental survey equipment. But Sarah's trained eye caught the truth. Mobile signal jammers, the kind used to create communications dead zones. They're isolating the test zone, she muttered, marking the jammers' positions on her tactical map. The pattern was clear. They were creating a bubble of silence around the northern mines, ensuring no unauthorized communications could get in or out during the demonstration. But here's where it gets interesting. As Sarah monitored their preparations, she noticed something odd about their patrol patterns. The security teams were concentrating their efforts on obvious approach routes, leaving the higher mountain trails largely uncovered. They were thinking like urban operators, not mountain fighters. Mike's voice crackled through her secure radio. Shadow paths are clear. My people report no movement on the high trails. Sarah smiled grimly. Kane's crew had fallen into the oldest trap in warfare, assuming the enemy would think like them. They'd secured roads, valleys, and main cave entrances, but they'd ignored the paths that generations of tribal hunters had used to track prey across these mountains. Her satellite phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Anna Petrovich. Federal task force in position. 24 hours out. Can you delay the demonstration? Sarah's mind raced through scenarios. A direct assault would risk civilian casualties, but if she could disrupt their testing schedule, force them to relocate or reschedule, the task force would have time to mobilize properly. She keyed her radio. Mike, remember those stories about your grandfather's hunting techniques? The ones that made prey come to him? The Shadow Walker's way, Mike replied. Create confusion, make them doubt their own ground. Sarah checked her equipment one last time. Her mother's cache had included something else, specialized electronics, designed to interfere with certain types of targeting systems, the same kind of tech Kane was planning to demonstrate. Time to teach them about mountain hunting, she said softly. But listen to this. As Sarah prepared to move, her surveillance feeds caught something unexpected. A convoy of black SUVs was heading toward Lucy's diner. Through her directional microphone, she caught fragments of radio chatter. Secure the package. Demonstration requirements. Civilian test subjects. Sarah's blood ran cold. They weren't just planning to demonstrate the weapon system. They were going to use the town itself as a testing ground. Show their buyers how effectively their tech could target civilian infrastructure. A message from her Belgrade contact confirmed her fears. Previous demonstration pattern identified. They showcased the system by taking control of local drones, civilian aircraft, create controlled chaos to prove effectiveness. Sarah's tactical plans shifted instantly. This wasn't just about stopping a weapons deal anymore. Kane was about to turn Thunder Creek into a live-fire testing zone, using her community as unwitting participants. She radioed Mike. Change of plans. They're bringing the fight to town. I need eyes on every drone, every piece of remote-controlled equipment. In the valley. Already on it, Mike replied. My people are spreading the word. Anything that can be controlled remotely is being powered down. Sarah moved through the forest with practiced silence, making her way to a ridgeline overlooking the town. Through her tactical scope, she watched Kane's men positioning what looked like mobile command centers, innocent-looking vans packed with the kind of technology that could hijack every electronic system in range. But here's the thing about Thunder Creek. While Kane saw a vulnerable small town, Sarah saw a community that had survived everything from blizzards to wildfires, a place where people looked out for each other. And right now, that community was quietly preparing for a fight they couldn't see but instinctively understood was coming. Lucy's voice came through the secure channel Mike had given her. Sarah, honey, your message got through. Every piece of remote equipment in town is being shut down. Even got the kids to ground their drones. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Kane thought he was dealing with simple country folks. He was about to learn that sometimes the best defenders are the ones who know exactly what they're protecting, but that's not all. As Sarah watched through her scope, she noticed something else. Kane's security teams were setting up what looked like portable weather stations around the town perimeter. But their positioning was wrong for meteorological data collection. They're creating a test grid, she realized, remembering similar setups from her Belgrade days. These stations weren't measuring weather. They were establishing a control zone for their weapons system, turning Thunder Creek into a precisely mapped testing ground. Her satellite phone vibrated with an urgent message from her contact. Buyers moving timeline up. Demo scheduled for tomorrow morning. Primary target identified, regional air traffic control systems. Sarah's tactical mind quickly processed the implications. By hijacking air traffic control, they could demonstrate their system's capability to disrupt critical infrastructure without obvious violence. Clean, efficient, and terrifying to potential buyers. She checked her mother's cached equipment one more time. Among the specialized gear was something else, a set of frequency jammers designed to disrupt exactly the kind of control systems Kane was setting up. Catherine Blackwood hadn't just been preparing for emergencies, she'd been ready for war. Mike, Sarah radioed, Get word to your people in the high country. When you see the signal, I need every hunting rifle with a scope targeting those weather stations. They're not what they seem." "Copy that," Mike replied. "The shadows are watching." Because here's the truth about Thunder Creek Valley. It wasn't just about stopping a weapons demonstration anymore. It was about protecting a way of life from those who saw rural communities as easy targets. And Sarah Blackwood hadn't spent years in the shadows to let technology become a weapon against her own people. She checked the time. 18 hours until Kane's demonstration. 18 hours to turn their own surveillance grid against them, to show them why you don't underestimate people who've spent generations learning to read the land and weather. The war for Thunder Creek was entering its crucial phase, and Sarah was about to teach them all what her mother had always said. The deadliest predator isn't the one with the most advanced weapons. It's the one who knows how to turn the enemy's strength into their greatest weakness. As night fell over Thunder Creek Valley, Sarah moved like a ghost through the mountain shadows. Her mother's cached equipment had included something else, night vision gear that made the darkness as clear as day. Through it, she watched Kane's operation transformed the valley into a high-tech testing ground. The weather stations formed a perfect grid around the town, their innocent appearance masking their true purpose. But Sarah had seen similar setups before, in places where testing military tech meant civilian casualties were just collateral data. "Teams in position," Mike's voice whispered through her secure radio. "Every station marked." Sarah checked her tactical display. Red dots marked each of Kane's surveillance points, while green markers showed the positions of Mike's tribal hunters, invisible in the darkness, rifles ready. But they weren't here for violence. Their job was precision. When the signal came, they'd take out Kane's monitoring equipment, not his people. But that's not all. Sarah's thermal imaging showed movement in the old mine tunnels. Teams setting up what looked like server banks and power distribution nodes. Through her directional microphone, she caught fragments of technical discussion, neural network online, test parameters set, civilian systems identified. The pieces clicked into place. Kane's weapon system wasn't just about hijacking drones or disrupting communications. It was an AI-driven platform that could take control of any network system in range. The weather stations weren't just monitoring points, they were nodes in an artificial intelligence grid designed to overwhelm and control civilian infrastructure. Sarah's satellite phone vibrated with an urgent message. "Buyers advancing. Timeline again. Demo at dawn. Primary target confirmed. Regional air traffic systems." Her jaw tightened. By targeting air traffic control, they could demonstrate their system's power without obvious violence, show potential buyers how easily they could create chaos while maintaining plausible deniability. But here's where it gets interesting. As Sarah studied their patrol patterns, she noticed something they'd overlooked. The underground power grid feeding their system, the one they'd tapped into through the old mines, had a weakness. A weakness her mother had mapped years ago. "Lucy," Sarah whispered into her radio, "remember that old transformer station behind your diner? The one that used to cause blackouts during storms?" "Sure do," Lucy replied. "Your mama helped upgrade it back in '98, said something about grid stability being national security." Sarah smiled in the darkness. Catherine Blackwood hadn't just been thinking about power outages. She'd been creating a fail-safe, a way to isolate and shut down sections of the grid if needed. "Mike, I need your best hunters on the ridge above Tunnel 6, Sarah instructed. "When you see the signal, take out the primary relay station. Make it look like equipment failure." "Copy that," Mike replied. "But Sarah, Kane's got backup generators." "Big ones. That's what they think," Sarah said softly. Through her scope, she watched Kane's tech teams making final adjustments to their equipment, confident in their redundant power systems. They had no idea that Catherine Blackwood had spent years mapping every power junction, every backup circuit in the valley. Because here's the truth about Thunder Creek. While Kane saw it as an isolated testing ground, Sarah's mother had seen it as a potential battlefield. Those infrastructure upgrades she'd overseen weren't just about modernizing the valley. They were about creating a network of kill switches, ways to shut down any hostile tech operation that tried to take root. Sarah moved silently toward the main power junction, her mind racing through the sequences her mother had drilled into her years ago. Sometimes, Catherine had said, the best way to fight isn't with bullets, but with blackouts. Through her tactical feed, Sarah watched Kane's operation reach full deployment. Their AI system was coming online, reaching out through the weather stations to map every network device in range. In less than 6 hours, they would demonstrate their ability to take control of civilian aircraft using Thunder Creek's airspace as their proving ground. But that's not all. As Sarah monitored their preparations, she caught another conversation through her directional mic that made her blood run cold. Secondary demonstration requirement confirmed, a tech operator was saying. Local cellular network. Compromised, emergency services can be disabled on command. Sarah's fists clenched. They weren't just planning to show control of air traffic. They wanted to prove they could cut off a community from emergency help. Turn isolation into a weapon. A sudden movement caught her attention. Through thermal imaging, she spotted 3 of Kane's men setting up what looked like a mobile command post near the old Miller Ranch. Their positioning was deliberate. They had clear lines of sight to both the town and the valley's main access road. "Sarah," Mike's voice crackled through her radio, "we've got movement on the reservation side. They're setting up some kind of signal boosters along the ridge." Sarah checked her tactical map. The pattern was clear. Kane's team wasn't just creating a test zone. They were establishing a full electronic blockade. Any attempt to call for outside help would be detected and blocked. But they'd made a crucial mistake. They assumed that because Thunder Creek was rural, it was unsophisticated. They never considered that someone might have spent years preparing for exactly this kind of threat. Sarah's radio crackled again. Feed from town cameras shows Petrov arriving at the command center. Kane's giving them a pre-demonstration briefing. Perfect. All the major players were gathering in one place, confident in their technical superiority. They never noticed the shadows moving through the high country, the rifles taking position, the way the entire community had become part of an invisible resistance. Through her night vision, Sarah spotted movement near the main power junction. Kane's security teams doing final checks. She melted deeper into the shadows, her mother's training taking over. Catherine had taught her more than just access codes and kill switches. She taught her daughter the art of becoming invisible. In plain sight, remember, her mother's voice echoed in her memory. Technology is just a tool. The real weapon is knowing when to strike. Sarah's satellite phone buzzed one last time. Buyers starting system initialization. Test sequence commencing in 4 hours. Her tactical display was updated with new information. Kane's men had finished setting up their perimeter. The weather stations were now fully online, their innocent appearance masking a sophisticated network of sensors and control nodes. Through her enhanced optics, Sarah could see the faint electromagnetic signatures pulsing between them, a digital web designed to ensnare an entire community. But that's exactly what they'd expected. What they hadn't counted on was the other network, the one Catherine Blackwood had spent years building, a system of fail-safes and kill switches hidden in the valley's infrastructure, waiting for exactly this kind of threat. Sarah checked her mother's old tactical watch, a special model designed for electronic warfare operations. The display confirmed what she'd suspected. Kane's system was broadcasting on predictable frequencies, following standard military protocols. They thought their encryption was unbreakable. They hadn't considered that someone might have spent years preparing countermeasures. A grim smile crossed her face as she prepared to move. Kane's crew thought they were running the most advanced weapons test in the Valley's history. They were about to learn that sometimes the oldest technologies, darkness, silence, and the ability to disappear, are the most effective weapons of all. Because that's the thing about mountain people. While others might see them as simple, they understand something crucial about survival. Sometimes the best defense isn't about matching the enemy's strength. It's about knowing exactly when and where to hit their weaknesses. Sarah reached the main power junction, her mother's old access codes still fresh in her memory. In less than 4 hours, Kane would learn why Catherine Blackwood had always said the most dangerous predator isn't the one with the biggest weapons. It's the one who knows how to turn darkness itself into an ally. Thunder Creek was about to teach them all a lesson about underestimating ranch country, and Sarah Blackwood was finally ready to show them why her mother's legacy was about more than just keeping the lights on. It was about protecting their way of life from those who thought advanced technology made them invincible. Because here's the truth about tonight. While Kane's team prepared to demonstrate their power over civilian infrastructure, they'd forgotten the most important rule of warfare. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the most devastating. And Sarah was about to remind them why you don't bring high-tech weapons to a fight with someone who knows how to make darkness their friend. Through her tactical scope, Sarah watched the final pieces of Kane's operation fall into place. The weather. Stations pulsed with deadly purpose, their sensors reaching out to map every electronic device in the valley. The backup generators hummed, ready to maintain their systems, even if the main power failed. The security teams moved with military precision, confident in their superior technology and training. But they missed the shadows moving through the high country. They missed the rifles taking position, held by hunters who'd learned patience from generations of mountain life. They missed the way the entire community had become part of an invisible resistance, guided by the daughter of a woman who'd spent years preparing for this very fight. Because that's the thing about predators. They get sloppy when they think they're at the top of the food chain. They forget that sometimes the most dangerous hunter is the one who knows how to become the ghost in the darkness, the whisper in the shadows, the threat they never see coming until it's too late. As night fell over Thunder Creek Valley, Sarah moved like a ghost through the mountain shadows. Her mother's cached equipment had included something else, night vision gear that made the darkness as clear as day. Through it, she watched Kane's operation transform the valley into a high-tech testing ground. The weather stations formed a perfect grid around the town, their innocent appearance masking their true purpose. But Sarah had seen similar setups before, in places where testing military tech meant civilian casualties were just collateral data. Teams in position. Mike's voice whispered through her secure radio. Every station marked. Sarah checked her tactical display. Red dots marked each of Kane's surveillance points, while green markers showed the positions of Mike's tribal hunters. Invisible in the darkness, rifles ready. But they weren't here for violence. Their job was precision. When the signal came, they'd take out Kane's monitoring equipment, not his people. But that's not all. Sarah's thermal imaging showed movement in the old mine tunnels. Team setting up what looked like server banks and power distribution nodes. Through her directional microphone, she caught fragments of technical discussion, neural network online, test parameters set, civilian systems identified, the pieces clicked into place. Kane's weapon system wasn't just about hijacking drones or disrupting communications. It was an AI-driven platform that could take control of any network system in range. The weather stations weren't just monitoring points. They were nodes in an artificial intelligence grid designed to overwhelm and control civilian infrastructure. Sarah's satellite phone vibrated with an urgent message. Buyers advancing. Timeline again. Demo at dawn. Primary target confirmed. Regional air traffic systems. Her jaw tightened. By targeting air traffic control, they could demonstrate their system's power without obvious violence. Show potential buyers how easily. They could create chaos while maintaining plausible deniability. Sarah reached the main power junction, her mother's old access codes still fresh in her memory. In less than 4 hours, Kane would learn why Catherine Blackwood had always said the most dangerous predator isn't the one with the biggest weapons. It's the one who knows how to turn darkness itself into an ally. Thunder Creek was about to teach them all a lesson about underestimating ranch country, and Sarah Blackwood was finally ready to show them why her mother's legacy was about more than just keeping the lights on. It was about protecting their way of life from those who thought advanced technology made them invincible. Because here's the truth about tonight. While Kane's team prepared to demonstrate their power over civilian infrastructure, they'd forgotten the most important rule of warfare. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the most devastating. And Sarah was about to remind them why you don't bring high-tech weapons to a fight with someone who knows how to make darkness their friend. Through her tactical scope, Sarah watched the final pieces of Kane's operation fall into place. The weather. Stations pulsed with deadly purpose, their sensors reaching out to map every electronic device in the valley. The backup generators hummed, ready to maintain their systems, even if the main power failed. The security teams moved with military precision, confident in their superior technology and training. But they missed the shadows moving through the high country. They missed the rifles taking position, held by hunters who'd learned patience from generations of mountain life. They missed the way the entire community had become part of an invisible resistance, guided by the daughter of a woman who'd spent years preparing for this very fight. Because that's the thing about predators. They get sloppy when they think they're at the top of the food chain. They forget that sometimes the most dangerous hunter is the one who knows how to become the ghost in the darkness, the whisper in the shadows, the threat they never see coming until it's too late. As night fell over Thunder Creek Valley, Sarah moved like a ghost through the mountain shadows. Her mother's cached equipment had included something else, night vision gear that made the darkness as clear as day. Through it, she watched Kane's operation transform the valley into a high-tech testing ground. The weather stations formed a perfect grid around the town, their innocent appearance masking their true purpose. But Sarah had seen similar setups before, in places where testing military tech meant civilian casualties were just collateral data. Teams in position. Mike's voice whispered through her secure radio. Every station marked. Sarah checked her. Tactical display. Red dots marked each of Kane's surveillance points, while green markers showed the positions of Mike's tribal hunters. Invisible in the darkness, rifles ready. But they weren't here for violence. Their job was precision. When the signal came, they'd take out Kane's monitoring equipment, not his people. But that's not all. Sarah's thermal imaging showed movement in the old mine tunnels. Team setting up what looked like server banks and power distribution nodes. Through her directional microphone, she caught fragments of technical discussion, neural network online, test parameters set, civilian systems identified, the pieces clicked into place. Kane's weapon system wasn't just about hijacking drones or disrupting communications. It was an AI-driven platform that could take control of any network system in range. The weather stations weren't just monitoring points. They were nodes in an artificial intelligence grid designed to overwhelm and control civilian infrastructure. Sarah's satellite phone vibrated with an urgent message. Buyers advancing. Timeline again. Demo at dawn. Primary target confirmed. Regional air traffic systems. Her jaw tightened. By targeting air traffic control, they could demonstrate their system's power without obvious violence. Show potential buyers how easily. They could create chaos while maintaining plausible deniability. A grim smile crossed her face as she prepared to move. Kane's crew thought they were running the most advanced weapons test in the Valley's history. They were about to learn that sometimes the oldest technologies, darkness, silence, and the ability to disappear, are the most effective weapons of all. Because that's the thing about mountain people. While others might see them as simple, they understand something crucial about survival. Sometimes the best defense isn't about matching the enemy's strength, it's about knowing exactly when and where to hit their weaknesses. Sarah reached the main power junction, her mother's old access code still fresh in her memory. In less than 4 hours, Kane would learn why Catherine Blackwood had always said the most dangerous predator isn't the one with the biggest weapons. It's the one who knows how to turn darkness itself into an ally. Thunder Creek was about to teach them all a lesson about underestimating ranch country, and Sarah Blackwood was finally ready to show them why her mother's legacy was about more than just keeping the lights on. It was about protecting their way of life from those who thought advanced technology made them invincible. Because here's the truth about tonight. While Kane's team prepared to demonstrate their power over civilian infrastructure, they'd forgotten the most important rule of warfare. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the most devastating. And Sarah was about to remind them why you don't bring high-tech weapons to a fight with someone who knows how to make darkness their friend. Dawn was 3 hours away when Sarah made her first move. Through her thermal scope, she watched Kane's security teams complete their final checks, their confidence evident in their relaxed postures. They thought their greatest threat would come from federal authorities, not from a rancher's daughter who knew every shadow in the valley. Sarah's radio crackled with Mike's voice. "Sarah, their drones are showing erratic behavior, starting to drift from programmed patterns." A grim smile crossed her face. The AI was already struggling to maintain control, its perfect digital model corrupted by carefully engineered anomalies. And they hadn't even started the real interference yet. But that's not all. Sarah's directional microphone picked up increasingly heated arguments from Kane's command post. "These readings can't be right," a technician was saying. "The power grids. Behavior doesn't match any known pattern." "Run it again," Kane's voice cut through, sharp with irritation. "The buyers are expecting a flawless demonstration. We're not delaying because of some local power fluctuations." Sarah's tactical display showed the strain their system was under. The AI was constantly adjusting, trying to compensate for irregularities that shouldn't exist. Each compensation only made its model less accurate, creating a cascade of minor errors that were slowly undermining its reliability. Through her enhanced optics, she watched Petrov pace outside the command center, speaking rapidly into a satellite phone. His body language showed growing concern. This wasn't the smooth, technical demonstration he'd been promised. "Mike," Sarah whispered into her radio, "have your people ready. When these drones start failing, they'll try to switch to manual control. That's when we take out the weather stations." "Copy that," Mike replied. "My grandfather would appreciate the irony, using their own technology to make them doubt their superiority." Sarah moved silently to her next position, remembering her mother's lessons. Catherine Blackwood hadn't just taught her daughter about electronic warfare, she'd taught her about the psychology of overconfident opponents, how to turn their belief in technological superiority into a weakness. Through her surveillance feed, she watched Kane's operations starting to fray at the edges. Security teams were breaking formation, chasing down anomalous readings. Technicians were running repeated diagnostics, trying to explain data that didn't fit their models. The perfect digital order they'd tried to impose on Thunder Creek was slowly dissolving into confusion. "All teams, tighten the perimeter," Kane's voice crackled through their comms. "No more surprises. This demonstration happens at dawn, no matter what." But here's where it gets interesting. As Sarah monitored their communications, she noticed something that would prove crucial. In their rush to compensate for the power irregularities, Kane's team had started boosting their signal strength. They were trying to override what they thought were local interference patterns. "Amateur move," Sarah muttered, remembering her mother's teachings. By increasing power to their systems, they were making those systems more vulnerable to the specific types of feedback Catherine Blackwood had designed her grid modifications to create. Sarah's satellite phone buzzed with an urgent update. Buyers. Getting nervous. Petrov demanded an explanation for system instabilities. Kane promised a full demonstration in 90 minutes. Through her tactical scope, she watched more security teams deploy, their movements showing increasing urgency. They were expanding their search patterns, looking for some physical cause for their technical problems. But they were looking in the wrong places, searching for conventional threats, while their own systems slowly turned against them. Because that's the thing about overconfident predators. They never consider that their prey might have spent years preparing the battlefield, that every quirk of Thunder Creek's infrastructure might be part of a carefully designed trap. Her mother's tactical watch showed the time, less than 2 hours until dawn. Less than 2 hours to turn Kane's demonstration of power into a lesson. About the dangers of underestimating ranch country, Sarah keyed her radio one last time. All teams remember, when the chaos starts, stick to the plan. Let them think their own technology is failing. The more they try to fix it, the worse it gets. Because here's the truth about Thunder Creek Valley. While Kane saw it as a perfect testing ground for his AI weapon, Catherine Blackwood had spent years turning it into something else. A place where high technology could be defeated not by direct opposition, but by the careful cultivation of doubt. And Sarah Blackwood was finally ready to show them exactly why her mother had always said the most dangerous predator isn't the one with the most powerful weapons. It's the one who knows how to make those weapons become their own worst enemy. Thunder Creek was about to teach them all a lesson about the difference between controlling technology and truly understanding it. Because sometimes the best way to defeat an enemy isn't by matching their strength, but by turning their greatest asset into a liability they never saw coming. Dawn was 3 hours away when Sarah made her first move. Through her thermal scope, she watched Kane's security teams complete their final checks, their confidence evident in their relaxed postures. They thought their greatest threat would come from federal authorities, not from a rancher's daughter who knew every shadow in the valley. "All stations report ready," crackled through her directional microphone. "System initialization at 90%. Sarah keyed her radio. "Mike, status on the ridge?" 12 rifles in position," came the whispered reply. "Every weather station is marked, waiting on your signal." But that's not all. Sarah's surveillance feeds showed increased activity around the mine entrances. Teams of technicians were rolling out what looked like portable server racks, connecting them to the power grid through hastily installed junctions. Their rushed work told her everything. They were ahead of schedule, but behind on preparation. "Beta test sequence initiating," a tech's voice carried through the night. "Drone control systems online." Sarah's jaw tightened as she watched 3 commercial drones lift off from Kane's command post. Test platforms, preparing to demonstrate how their AI system could hijack civilian aircraft. Through her tactical display, she tracked their flight paths, deliberate patterns designed to map the valley's electronic signature. Her satellite phone vibrated. Petrov confirmed paying double for accelerated timeline. Full demonstration in 2 hours. Air traffic control systems have already been compromised. Time to change the game. Sarah reached the main power junction, her mother's old security protocol still active after all these years. Catherine Blackwood hadn't just been paranoid, she'd been preparing for exactly this kind of threat. "Lucy," Sarah whispered into her radio, "remember how to trigger that old backup generator at the diner?" "The one that never worked right," Lucy replied. "Sure do. Your mama always said to save it for a special occasion. Sarah smiled in the darkness. That generator had been deliberately miscalibrated, designed to create specific power fluctuations. When activated, fluctuations that could disrupt certain types of military-grade electronics. Fire it up in exactly 10 minutes, Sarah instructed, then get clear. But here's where it gets interesting. As Sarah monitored Kane's operation, she noticed something they'd overlooked. Their AI system wasn't just mapping the Valley's electronic devices. It was creating a digital model of every networked system in range, a model that assumed everything was operating on standard civilian protocols. They'd never considered that someone might have spent years building irregularities into the grid, little quirks and fluctuations that looked like rural power problems, but were actually designed to create electronic blind spots. Through her night vision, Sarah watched Kane's security teams conduct their final sweeps. Their thermal signatures showed top-tier tactical gear, body armor, encrypted comms and military-grade weapons. But all that equipment relied on stable power and predictable electronic environments. Sarah, Mike's voice crackled, got movement on the North Ridge. Looks like more buyers are arriving. Sarah checked her tactical display. 3 SUVs moving with professional precision. More arms dealers coming to see Kane's demonstration. Perfect. The more witnesses to their failure, the better. Another voice cut through her radio. One of Kane's security teams. Grid section. 7 shows power fluctuations. Running diagnostic. Sarah's smile widened. They were already starting to see ghosts in their systems. Catherine Blackwood's carefully engineered flaws in the power grid were beginning to create doubt in their perfect digital model. But that's not all. Through her directional microphone, Sarah caught fragments of increasingly worried technical discussions, signal variance exceeding parameters. Local interference patterns don't match historical data. AI having trouble establishing a stable baseline. The chaos was spreading through their systems, subtle but persistent. Each unexplained power fluctuation, each mysterious signal anomaly made their AI work harder to maintain its digital model of the Valley. And with every adjustment, every compensation, it drifted further from reality. Sarah moved silently through the darkness, her mother's old tactical gear making her nearly invisible to modern thermal imaging. She reached a secondary power junction, one that didn't appear on any official maps. Catherine Blackwood had installed it years ago, disguised as a routine infrastructure upgrade. Through her enhanced optics, Sarah watched Kane's operation, reaching full deployment. Their confidence was still high, but she could see the first signs of uncertainty. Technicians double-checking readings, security teams adjusting patrol patterns to investigate anomalies that shouldn't exist. System initialization at 95%, crackled through her surveillance feed, detecting minor grid instabilities, compensating. Perfect. They were doing exactly what Catherine had predicted years ago, trying to impose digital order on a system deliberately designed to resist it. Every compensation, every adjustment, only made their AI's model less accurate. Sarah's tactical display showed the full scope of their operation. The weather stations formed a perfect grid, their sensors reaching out to map and control every electronic device in range. Backup generators hummed, ready to maintain their systems, even if the main power failed. Security teams moved with military precision, guarding against conventional threats. But they'd made a crucial mistake. They assumed that because Thunder Creek was rural, its systems would be simple, predictable. They never considered that someone might have spent years making those systems deliberately unpredictable. Through her thermal scope, Sarah spotted more movement at Kane's command post. Petrov had arrived with his technical team, specialists who'd helped develop the AI system. They were here to witness their creation take control of an entire community's infrastructure. Instead, they were about to learn why Catherine Blackwood, had always said the most sophisticated weapon isn't the one with the most advanced AI. It's the one that knows how to make that AI doubt its own reality. Sarah checked her mother's old tactical watch. The timing had to be perfect. Too much chaos too quickly would alert them to deliberate interference. But if she timed it right, each malfunction would seem like a natural consequence of their rushed deployment. Because here's the truth about Thunder Creek Valley. While Kane saw it as a simple testing ground, Catherine Blackwood had spent years turning it into something else. A place where high technology could be defeated, not by direct opposition, but by the careful cultivation of uncertainty. Sarah's radio crackled with Mike's voice. "Sarah, their drones are showing erratic behavior, starting to drift from programmed patterns." A grim smile crossed her face. The AI was already struggling to maintain control, its perfect digital model corrupted by carefully engineered anomalies, and they hadn't even started the real interference. Yet Thunder Creek was about to teach them all a lesson about underestimating ranch country. Because sometimes the most dangerous predator isn't the one with the most powerful weapons. It's the one who knows how to make those weapons question their own reliability. And Sarah Blackwood was finally ready to show them exactly why. Her mother had always said the best way to defeat an enemy isn't by matching their strength, but by turning their strength into a weakness. Dawn was still 3 hours away when Sarah made her first move. Through her thermal scope, she watched Kane's security teams complete their final checks, their confidence evident in their relaxed postures. They thought their greatest threat would come from federal authorities, not from a rancher's daughter who knew every shadow in the valley. "All stations report ready," crackled through her directional microphone. "System initialization at 90%. Sarah keyed her radio. "Mike, status on the ridge." 12 rifles in position, came the whispered reply. "Every weather station is marked, waiting on your signal, but that's not all." Sarah's surveillance feeds showed increased activity around the mine entrances. Teams of technicians were rolling out what looked like portable server racks, connecting them to the power grid through hastily installed junctions. Their rushed work told her everything. They were ahead of schedule, but behind on preparation. "Beta. Test sequence initiating," a text voice carried through the night. "Drone control systems online." Sarah's jaw tightened as she watched 3 commercial drones lift off from Kane's command post. Test platforms, preparing to demonstrate how their AI system could hijack civilian aircraft. Through her tactical display, she tracked their flight. Paths, deliberate patterns designed to map the valley's electronic signature. Her satellite phone vibrated. Petrov confirmed paying double for accelerated timeline. Full demonstration in 2 hours. Air traffic control systems have already been compromised. Time to change the game. Sarah reached the main power junction, her mother's old security protocols still active after all these years. Catherine Blackwood hadn't just been paranoid, she'd been preparing for exactly this kind of threat. "Lucy," Sarah whispered into her radio, "remember how to trigger that old backup generator at the diner?" "The one that never worked right," Lucy replied. "Sure do. Your mama always said to save it for a special occasion." Sarah smiled in the darkness. That generator had been deliberately miscalibrated, designed to create specific power fluctuations. When activated, fluctuations that could disrupt certain types of military-grade electronics. "Fire it up in exactly 10 minutes, Sarah instructed, "then get clear." But here's where it gets interesting. As Sarah monitored Kane's operation, she noticed something they'd overlooked. Their AI system wasn't just mapping the valley's electronic devices. It was creating a digital model of every networked system in range, a model that assumed everything was operating on standard civilian protocols. They'd never considered that someone might have spent years building irregularities into the grid, little quirks and fluctuations that looked like rural power problems, but were actually designed to create electronic blind spots. Through her night vision, Sarah watched Kane's security teams conduct their final sweeps. Their thermal signatures showed top-tier tactical gear, body armor, encrypted comms, and military-grade weapons. But all that equipment relied on stable power and predictable electronic environments. "Sarah!" Mike's voice crackled. "Got movement on the North Ridge. Looks like more buyers are arriving." Sarah checked her tactical display. 3 SUVs moving with professional precision. More arms dealers coming to see Kane's demonstration. Perfect. The more witnesses to their failure, the better. But that's not all. As the SUVs approached Kane's command post, Sarah caught fragments of radio traffic that made her blood run cold. Secondary test package ready, civilian infrastructure control, full system lockdown. They weren't just planning to demonstrate. Drone control. They wanted to show how their AI could seize control of everything. Power, communications, emergency services, turn an entire community into a digital prison. Sarah's fingers flew across her mother's old tactical keyboard, accessing systems that hadn't been touched in years. Catherine Blackwood hadn't just created kill switches. She'd built an entire shadow infrastructure, a way to route power and communications through channels Kane's AI wouldn't detect. "Mike," Sarah radioed, "when you see the signal, I need your people to trigger every generator and power system you've got. Make it look random." "Copy that," Mike replied. "My grandfather always said the best way to confuse outsiders is to act like everything's normal when nothing is." Sarah smiled grimly, because that's the thing about Thunder Creek. While Kane saw a simple rural community, he'd missed the layers of resistance built into its very infrastructure. Every quirky power system, every unreliable generator, every piece of outdated equipment was part of Catherine Blackwood's legacy. Through her tactical feed, Sarah watched Kane's AI system complete its initialization. The weather stations pulsed with malicious purpose, their sensors reaching out to map and categorize every electronic device in range. On her display, she could see their digital net closing, a web of control and surveillance that assumed it could predict and manipulate every system it touched. But they'd made a crucial mistake. They thought technology was about control, about bending systems to your will. They'd never understood what Catherine Blackwood had taught her daughter years ago. Sometimes the best way to fight isn't about control at all. It's about introducing just enough chaos to make control impossible. Sarah checked her mother's old tactical watch. 1 hour until Kane's demonstration. 1 hour to show them why you don't bring high-tech weapons to a fight with someone who knows how to make technology itself unreliable. Because here's the truth about Thunder Creek Valley. It wasn't just about protecting land anymore. It was about showing them that sometimes the most sophisticated weapon isn't the one with the most advanced AI. It's the one that knows exactly how to make that AI doubt its own data. Thunder Creek was about to teach them all a lesson about underestimating ranch country. And Sarah Blackwood was finally ready to show them why her mother had always said, the most dangerous predator isn't the one with the most advanced hunting tools. It's the one who knows how to make those tools work against their own master. Sarah's tactical display lit up with new alerts. Kane's desperate attempt to assert control had triggered emergency protocols in their own equipment. Military-grade night vision systems were creating false signatures, multiplying every shadow into potential threats. Thermal scopes showed phantom heat signatures where none existed. "We're getting multiple breaches," a security team leader shouted through their comms. "Grid sectors 3, 7, and 9 showing unauthorized access." But there were no breaches. Catherine Blackwood's modified systems were feeding their sensors exactly the kind of data designed to trigger maximum paranoia. Every piece of outdated infrastructure was now serving its true purpose, creating a web of electromagnetic chaos that turned their own technology against them. Through her directional microphone, Sarah caught fragments of increasingly panicked communications. Can't verify friendly signatures, targeting systems compromised, AI core reporting critical authentication failures. Command, we're seeing movement everywhere, but nothing's there. The sophisticated security teams, trained to trust their equipment implicitly, were now trapped in a nightmare of their own making. Every system they relied on was feeding them contradictory information, creating a perfect storm of technological paranoia. Sarah watched through her scope as Kane emerged from the command center, his face illuminated by the emergency lights. "Shut it down!" he shouted. "Shut everything down and reset!" But that's exactly what Catherine's system had been waiting for. The moment they initiated emergency shutdown, every modified component in the Valley's infrastructure activated its secondary protocols. The power grid began generating precisely calibrated interference patterns designed to prevent clean system restarts. "Mike," Sarah whispered into her radio, "your people seeing this?" "Like your mama always said," Mike replied. "Sometimes the best weapon is letting them think they're in control right up until they ain't. Because here's the thing about Kane's operation. They'd brought the most advanced military technology money could buy. But they'd never considered that someone might have spent years preparing for exactly this kind of threat, turning simple rural infrastructure into a sophisticated defensive weapon." Through her enhanced optics, Sarah watched the final phase of their collapse. Security teams, unable to trust their own equipment, had effectively isolated themselves. The AI system, trapped in an endless loop of corrupted data, was tearing itself apart, trying to establish control parameters that didn't exist. "System critical. Failure imminent," came the last coherent transmission from their command center. "AI core experiencing terminal cascade. All data corrupted. Cannot maintain operational integrity." Thunder Creek Valley had just demonstrated why Catherine Blackwood always said the most dangerous weapon isn't the one with the most advanced technology. It's the one that knows how to make that technology become its own worst enemy. And as the first light of dawn began to touch the mountain peaks, Sarah allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. They'd come to her valley thinking they'd found an easy target. Instead, they'd learned why you don't underestimate people who understand that sometimes the best way to fight isn't with force at all. It's with the careful cultivation of chaos. In the enemy's own systems, the federal task force would arrive soon to clean up what was left of Kane's operation. But the real victory had already been won. Thunder Creek had shown them all why Catherine Blackwood's legacy wasn't just about protecting land. It was about understanding that sometimes the most effective defense is letting the enemy's own arrogance become their downfall. Previous content remains the same until the end, then adds, Sarah's night vision caught more movement around Kane's command center. His security teams were now operating in chaos, their sophisticated equipment giving false readings and ghost targets. Through her directional microphone, she heard the growing panic in their communications. Multiple contact signatures. Can't get a lock. Systems showing threats in all directions. But that's not all. The AI's attempt to compensate for the cascading failures had created exactly the kind of feedback loop Catherine Blackwood had designed her modifications to exploit. Each attempt to assert control only made the system more unstable. "Sir?" A technician's voice shook with tension. "The targeting algorithms are corrupted. The system is identifying every electronic signature as a potential threat." Kane's response was immediate and dangerous. "Then we show them the consequences of interference, initiate total takeover of local systems, shut down everything." Through her tactical display, Sarah watched their desperate power surge hit the valley's infrastructure. But instead of giving them control, it triggered Catherine's final defensive protocols. Every modified component, every carefully altered circuit began generating precisely the kind of interference designed to create maximum disruption. The effect was devastating. Their own security systems turned against them, identifying friendly forces as threats. Communication equipment broadcast contradictory orders. Even their vehicles' electronic systems began failing, trapped in diagnostic loops triggered by the carefully engineered power fluctuations. "Sarah," Mike's voice crackled through her secure radio. "They're starting to fire on their own shadows. The tech's got them so confused, they can't tell what's real anymore." She keyed her radio. "All teams hold position. Let their own paranoia finish what we started. Because here's the truth about relying too heavily on technology. When it fails, it takes your judgment with it." Kane's teams, trained to trust their advanced equipment, were now paralyzed by its malfunction. Every shadow became a threat. Every system glitch sparked a response that only made things worse. Through her mother's old tactical scope, Sarah watched Kane's operation completely unravel. The buyers were already gone, their vehicles speeding away from what they saw as a catastrophic system failure. The security teams, their equipment giving false readings, had effectively cordoned themselves off from each other. But the real victory was happening in the digital realm. The AI system, unable to establish any reliable control parameters, had entered a terminal feedback loop. Each attempt to assert control only fed more corrupted data back into its learning algorithms. "Total system collapse," came a final transmission from the command center. "AI core experiencing cascading failures. Cannot maintain operational cohesion." Sarah allowed herself a small smile, remembering her mother's words. "Technology is just a tool. The moment you let it think for you is the moment you've lost the fight." Thunder Creek had just taught them all a lesson about the dangers of underestimating rural communities. Because sometimes the most effective resistance isn't about matching the enemy's strength, it's about letting their own arrogance become their downfall. Through her enhanced optics, Sarah watched Kane's operation disintegrate into complete chaos. Their sophisticated weapons system, designed to demonstrate power through technological superiority, had instead proved its own greatest vulnerability. And as dawn approached, the valley fell silent except for the sound of failing equipment and the quiet satisfaction of a community that had just proven why you don't bring untested technology to a fight with people who understand both its power and its limitations. The federal task force would arrive soon to clean up the mess, but the real victory had already been won. Thunder Creek Valley had shown them all why Catherine Blackwood's legacy wasn't just about protecting land. It was about understanding that sometimes the best defense is letting the enemy defeat themselves. The first sign that Sarah's plan was working came 90 minutes before dawn. Through her thermal scope, she watched Kane's operation descend into controlled chaos. Their test drones were behaving erratically, fighting against commands as the AI struggled to compensate for unexplainable signal anomalies. "Grid stability at 60%, a technician's panicked voice carried through her directional mic. "The AI can't establish reliable control parameters." Sarah moved silently through the darkness, her mother's tactical gear making her nearly invisible to their advanced security systems. From her new position, she could see Kane pacing in front of the command center, his composed facade cracking as more systems reported irregularities. But that's not all. The buyers were getting restless. Through her surveillance feed, Sarah watched Petrov argue with his technical team, pointing at data readouts that showed increasingly unstable system performance. "This is unacceptable," Petrov's accented voice cut through the night. "The demonstration requires precise control. If your system can't handle simple rural infrastructure..." Kane cut him off. "It's just local interference. We're boosting power to compensate." Sarah smiled grimly. That's exactly what her mother had predicted they'd do, try to overwhelm the problems with brute force. But Catherine Blackwood had designed her grid modifications specifically to turn such attempts against themselves. Through her tactical display, Sarah watched their whole operation starting to unravel. The weather stations were reporting conflicting data. their sensors confused by power fluctuations that shouldn't exist. Security teams were breaking formation, chasing down anomalous readings that led nowhere. "Mike," Sarah whispered into her. "Radio, status on the ridge." "Your mama's plan is working," Mike replied softly. "Their equipment's fighting itself. Even their night vision is getting unreliable, showing ghosts and shadows that ain't there." But here's where it gets interesting. As Kane's team struggled with their failing systems, Sarah's surveillance caught something crucial. They were rerouting power through secondary generators, trying to establish a stable operating base. In doing so, they'd accidentally activated one of Catherine Blackwood's oldest traps. Sarah's directional microphone picked up the results. "Sir, we're getting weird feedback loops. The more power we push through, the more unstable the readings become." "Then isolate the grid." Kane's voice cracked with frustration. "Cut all local power connections. Run everything off our own generators." Perfect, they were about to learn. Why Catherine Blackwood had always said the best trap is one the enemy springs themselves. Through her enhanced optics, Sarah watched them disconnect from the local power grid. For a moment, their systems stabilized. Then the real chaos began. The generators, sensing full load, activated their emergency protocols. Protocols that Catherine had quietly modified years ago during routine maintenance. Instead of providing clean power, they started outputting the exact frequency patterns designed to create maximum interference with military-grade electronics. Multiple system failures. A tech's voice rose in panic. AI losing cohesion. Targeting systems compromised. Sarah's tactical display showed the cascade effect spreading through their operation. The weather stations were now working against each other, their sensors feeding contradictory data into an AI system that couldn't resolve the conflicts. But that's not all. The buyers were starting to leave. Through her scope, Sarah watched Petrov and two other arms dealers heading for their vehicles, their body language showing clear disgust at the failed demonstration. Kane's voice carried across the command center. "Nobody leaves. We can fix this. The system works." "The system is a liability," Petrov shot back. "It cannot even maintain control in a simple rural environment. Our clients require reliability, not excuses." Sarah keyed her radio. "Mike, they're about to go. Desperate. Get your people ready. Because here's the truth about predators. They're most dangerous when cornered." And Kane had invested too much in this demonstration to let it fail. Through her surveillance feed, Sarah watched him grab a satellite. "Phone. Initiate Protocol 0. Full system override. I don't care about potential damage. Show them what this technology can really do." Sarah's blood ran cold. Protocol 0. She'd seen similar contingencies in her Belgrade days. When tech demos went wrong, some operators would deliberately use infrastructure failures to prove their system's destructive capability. But Kane had made a crucial mistake. In ordering a full power surge, he'd activated the final layer of Catherine Blackwood's defense system. Every modified generator, every faulty transformer, every piece of supposedly outdated equipment was about to serve its true purpose. Sarah's tactical display, lit up as power signatures, spiked across the valley. The AI, trying to assert control, was instead being fed exactly the kind of contradictory data designed to trigger its fail-safe protocols. Through her enhanced optics, she watched their entire operation dissolve into chaos. Drones dropped from the sky as their control systems crashed. The weather stations went into emergency shutdown, their sensors overwhelmed by deliberately engineered feedback loops. "All teams, prepare to engage." Kane's desperate voice carried through the night. "Find whatever's causing this and eliminate it." But that's exactly what Catherine Blackwood had prepared for. Every system failure, every malfunction, every digital ghost in their operation had been carefully designed to appear natural. There was nothing to find, no enemy to engage, just the accumulated weight of years of preparation turning their own technology against them. Sarah's satellite phone buzzed with an urgent message: Federal Task Force monitoring situation. Hold position, let them destroy their own credibility. Because here's the thing about Thunder Creek Valley: while Kane saw it as a simple backdrop for his weapons demonstration, Catherine Blackwood had spent years turning it into something else. A place where overconfidence in technology became a weapon against those who would abuse it. Through her tactical scope, Sarah watched the final act begin. Kane's security teams, their high-tech gear malfunctioning, were reduced to basic equipment. The AI system, unable to establish reliable control, was tearing itself apart, trying to compensate for irregularities that seemed to multiply with every attempted solution. Thunder Creek was about to teach them all a lesson about the difference between having power and knowing how to use it. Because sometimes the most devastating weapon isn't the one with the most advanced technology. It's the one that knows how to make that technology become its own worst enemy. Through her night vision, Sarah spotted more movement around the command center. Kane's remaining security teams were deploying in a pattern she recognized from her Belgrade days. A scorched earth formation designed to destroy everything during retreat. All units confirmed charges set, a voice crackled through her surveillance feed, waiting on final authorization. But there was something else. Sarah's thermal imaging showed heat signatures deep in the mine tunnels, signatures that matched industrial cooling systems. The kind used for housing sensitive electronic equipment. Sarah, Mike's voice was urgent. My people spotted them moving something from the deepest tunnel. Looks like servers, big ones. Her jaw tightened. They weren't just trying to destroy evidence. They were attempting to salvage the core of their AI system, the same system that had tried to take control of Thunder Creek's infrastructure. Through her directional microphone, she caught Kane's instructions. Primary objective is the AI core. Everything else is expendable. Show these ranch people what happens when they interfere with progress. Sarah's tactical display highlighted multiple detonation points throughout the valley. Kane's teams had rigged not just their own equipment, but key infrastructure nodes. They were planning to leave Thunder Creek dark and isolated while they escaped with their precious technology. But that's when Sarah noticed something crucial. The hasty placement of their charges had ignored the geological surveys Catherine Blackwood had spent years compiling. Her mother hadn't just mapped the mines. She'd identified every stress point, every natural weakness that could be used to control how the tunnels would collapse. "Lucy," Sarah radioed, "I need those survey coordinates now." "Sending them through," Lucy replied. Catherine marked some spots in red, others in blue, said the colors mattered. Sarah's eyes narrowed as she pulled up her mother's old files. The color coding wasn't just for organization. It was a blueprint for controlled demolition. Red marks showed points where a collapse would seal off sections of the mine. Blue marks identified areas where the rock structure would naturally channel explosive force away from the surface. Through her enhanced optics, she watched Kane make his final preparations. His teams had positioned themselves at what they thought were safe distances, ready to trigger a cascade of explosions that would cripple the valley's infrastructure. "Mike," Sarah whispered, "remember how my mom used to talk about the old mining days, about how the mountain sometimes decides which tunnels stay open?" "Sure do," Mike replied. "Said the smart miners learned to work with the rock, not against it." Sarah's fingers flew across her mother's tactical console, inputting the coordinates. From Catherine's surveys, each point was precisely calculated to use the mountain's natural structure against anyone who tried to weaponize it. Because here's the thing about Thunder Creek Valley. While Kane saw the mines as a simple tool for destruction, Catherine Blackwood had spent years understanding them as something else. A complex network of geological strengths and weaknesses that could be used to protect the community above. Through her tactical feed, Sarah watched Kane's operation enter its final phase. Teams reported their charges were armed and ready. The salvaged AI core was being loaded into reinforced transport vehicles. They thought they had planned for every contingency, but they hadn't planned for Catherine Blackwood's daughter. Sarah's display showed the federal task force was still 3 minutes out, not close enough to stop Kane's detonation sequence. But that was fine, because sometimes the best way to protect something isn't by preventing destruction, but by controlling exactly how that destruction unfolds. Thunder Creek Valley was about to teach them all one final lesson about the difference between knowing the land and truly understanding it. Because while Kane's team had brought the most sophisticated demolition equipment money could buy, they were about to learn why Catherine Blackwood had always said the mountain itself is the most powerful ally you can have, if you know how to work with it instead of against it. Sarah's tactical display lit up with warning indicators. Kane was accessing emergency protocols that matched patterns she'd seen before, the kind designed to destroy evidence and inflict maximum damage. During retreat, through her directional microphone, she caught his final orders: initiate total burn down. If we can't control this valley, no one will. But that's not all. Her surveillance feed showed Kane's remaining teams moving with new purpose. They weren't retreating. They were positioning for something bigger. "Mike," Sarah radioed urgently, "get your people clear of the weather stations. They're going to overload them. Because here's the thing about cornered predators. They'll burn everything just to spite those who trap them." Through her enhanced optics, Sarah watched Kane's teams plant explosive charges on their own equipment. They weren't just destroying evidence. They were turning their entire failed operation into one last act of vengeance. Her satellite phone buzzed. "Multiple detonation. Signatures detected. They're rigging the mine entrances." Sarah's mind raced through the implications. The old mine tunnels ran under half the valley. A chain reaction of explosions could destabilize the entire region, threatening not just property, but lives. But Kane had made one final mistake. In his desperation to salvage something from his failed demonstration, he'd forgotten who he was dealing with. Catherine Blackwood hadn't just prepared for electronic warfare. She'd mapped every crucial structural point in those tunnels. "Lucy," Sarah keyed her radio. "Remember those old mining surveys Mom made you keep in the diner's safe? The ones with all the red markings?" Lucy replied. "Been wondering about those for years." "Time to use them. Get me the coordinates for points 7 through 12. Because here's the truth about Thunder Creek Valley. While Kane saw the mines as a weapon to use against them, Catherine Blackwood had seen them as something else, a way to protect the valley even from underground threats. Through her tactical scope, Sarah watched Kane's operation enter its final phase. Teams were finishing their demolition work, rigging their sophisticated equipment to detonate. The AI system, still trapped in its death spiral, was randomly targeting its own components. "Sarah," Mike's voice carried urgency. "Federal task force is 5 minutes out, but Kane's teams are setting timers. We won't make it." A grim smile crossed Sarah's face as she entered the coordinates from Lucy into her mother's old tactical system. "We don't need to make it. Mom left us everything we need right here." Because that's the thing about Catherine Blackwood's preparations. They weren't just about defending against high-tech threats. Every survey, every map, every seemingly routine piece of paperwork had been part of a larger plan. Sarah's tactical display confirmed what she'd suspected. Kane's demolition charges were being placed exactly where her mother had predicted someone might try to use the mines as a weapon, and in each of those locations, Catherine had left her own surprises, carefully engineered weak points that would collapse specific tunnels while protecting the valley above. Through her enhanced optics, Sarah watched Kane make his way to what he thought was a safe distance, detonator in hand. He still thought he held the final card, the ability to take Thunder Creek down with him, but he was about to learn why Catherine Blackwood had always said the most dangerous opponent isn't the one with the most destructive weapons. It's the one who spent years preparing for exactly this kind of fight. Thunder Creek Valley was about to teach them all one final lesson about underestimating ranch country. Because sometimes the best defense isn't just about protecting what's above ground. It's about understanding every layer of the land you're fighting for. The first rays of dawn revealed the full extent of Kane's desperation. With his demonstration, in ruins and buyers fleeing, he made the decision Sarah had been waiting for, the one that would seal his fate. Initiate Protocol Black. His voice cut through the chaos. Full system override. Show them what happens when people interfere with our operation. Sarah's blood ran cold. Through her tactical display, she watched their AI system switch to unrestricted warfare protocols. Every safety limitation, every ethical constraint was being stripped away. They weren't trying to control infrastructure anymore. They were trying to weaponize it. But that's not all. Kane's security teams were deploying their backup equipment, hardened military gear designed to function even in extreme electronic warfare conditions. Through her thermal scope, Sarah watched them establish new defensive positions, their movements showing the kind of precision that came from years of combat experience. "Mike," Sarah whispered into her radio, "new game. They're switching to hardened systems. Our interference won't work much longer." "Copy that," Mike replied, "but they still have to use the power grid. Your mama's traps are still in play." Sarah smiled grimly. Catherine Blackwood had prepared for this too. The more powerful their equipment, the more vulnerable it would be to what was coming. Through her directional microphone, she caught Kane's final orders. "I want this valley dark. Take out power to every ranch, every business. Show them what happens when they choose the wrong side." But here's where it gets interesting. As Kane's teams deployed their hardened gear, they made exactly the mistake Catherine had anticipated years ago. To overcome the interference, they had to draw massive power through the grid. Power that would flow through circuits Catherine had spent years modifying. Sarah's tactical display showed the power surge building. Kane's systems were pulling enough electricity to run a small city, trying to brute force their way through the electronic chaos. Through her enhanced optics, she watched their confidence return as systems started coming back online. Phase 1 complete, a tech reported. Hardened systems operational, beginning target acquisition. Sarah keyed her radio. "All teams, hold. In position. Let them think they've won. Because that's the thing about overconfident predators. They never see the trap until it's too late." Kane's operation had just connected their most sophisticated equipment directly to Catherine Blackwood's greatest defensive innovation. Through her surveillance feed, Sarah watched the power levels climb. Kane's systems were functioning again, their hardened electronics pushing through the interference. But with every passing second, they were drawing more power, feeding more energy into circuits designed for exactly this scenario. Multiple targets. "Acquired," Kane's voice carried across the command center, "initiating valley-wide shutdown." Sarah's hand moved to her mother's old tactical console, the same console Catherine had used to test her modified power grid all those years ago. Time to show them why Mom always said the best defense is letting the enemy defeat themselves. With precise keystrokes, Sarah activated Catherine's final protocol. Across Thunder Creek Valley, years of careful preparation came to fruition. Every modified transformer, every altered circuit began generating specific frequencies that would be harmless to normal equipment but devastating to military-grade electronics. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Kane's hardened systems, drawing maximum power to overcome the interference, instead became conduits for their own destruction. Through her tactical display, Sarah watched their entire operation light. Up like a Christmas tree, then go dark. Critical system failure, voices shouted from the command center. Power surge detected, containment failing, but that's not all. The surge had triggered their AI's core protection protocols. Unable to distinguish between threats and friendly signals, it began targeting its own systems, treating every electronic signature as hostile. Through her thermal scope, Sarah watched Kane's security teams scramble as their own equipment turned against them. Communications gear broadcasted white noise, targeting systems locked onto friendly positions. Even their vehicles' electronic systems were shutting down, trapped in endless diagnostic loops. "Sarah!" Mike's voice crackled through her secure radio. "A federal task force just crossed the county line, 10 minutes out." Perfect timing. Thunder Creek Valley had just shown them why Catherine Blackwood always said the most dangerous trap is the one the enemy springs themselves. Kane's attempt to assert control through brute force had instead triggered a cascade of failures that no amount of military technology could overcome. Because here's the truth about Thunder Creek. While Kane saw it as a simple backdrop for his display of power, Catherine Blackwood had spent years turning it into something else, a place where the very infrastructure itself could become a weapon against those who would abuse it. Through her enhanced optics, Sarah watched the final moments of Kane's operation. The sophisticated AI system, trapped in a death spiral of corrupted data and power surges, was systematically destroying its own hardware. The security teams, their equipment either dead or actively working against them, were reduced to basic weapons and hand signals. And in the center of it all stood Kane, his face illuminated by sparking equipment, watching years of work and millions in technology tear itself apart. But Sarah knew his type. Men like him always had one last desperate move. Her tactical display confirmed it. Through the chaos, Kane was accessing a hidden command console, the same kind of backup system she'd seen in Belgrade, designed for one purpose: scorched earth protocols. Sarah's jaw tightened. The real fight was about to begin, because while Catherine Blackwood had prepared Thunder Creek's infrastructure for this battle, she'd also taught her daughter something else. Sometimes the most dangerous moment isn't during the main fight, but in those final seconds when a wounded predator has nothing left to lose. The final confrontation began in the grey light before true dawn. Sarah watched through her tactical display as Kane raised the detonator, his face illuminated by the emergency lights of his failing command center. His security teams were in position, thinking they controlled how this would end. Last chance. Kane's voice carried across the valley. "Stand down and let us leave with our equipment, or I bring this whole mountain down." But that's not all. Through her enhanced optics, Sarah spotted something that changed everything. The transport vehicle containing their AI core wasn't heading for the main road. It was moving toward the old North Tunnel, the same tunnel that led to an abandoned railway line crossing the Canadian border. "Sarah," Mike's urgent voice came. Through her radio, "Got movement on the reservation side, more vehicles coming in fast." Her tactical display confirmed it. Kane hadn't just planned for escape, he had a full extraction team waiting. This wasn't just about destroying evidence anymore. They were trying to salvage their weapon system and disappear across the border. Through her directional microphone, Sarah caught fragments of their communications. "Extraction team in position, AI core secure, ready for final countdown." But here's where it gets interesting. As Sarah monitored their movements, she noticed they were positioning their vehicles exactly where Catherine Blackwood's geological surveys had predicted someone might try to make a last stand. "Lucy," Sarah whispered into her radio. "Need those. Blue-marked coordinates, all of them. Because that's the thing about Thunder Creek Valley. While Kane saw it as a simple battlefield, Catherine Blackwood had spent years understanding its geology. Every ridge, every tunnel, every seemingly random feature had been mapped and analyzed for exactly this kind of situation. Sarah's fingers flew across her mother's tactical console, inputting the coordinates that would turn the mountain itself into their defender. Each point had been carefully chosen to work with the natural stress lines in the rock, creating a controlled response to any explosion. Through her thermal scope, she watched Kane's team finish their preparations. They'd rigged their charges without understanding the ground beneath them, without knowing that Catherine Blackwood had spent years preparing for someone who might try to use the mines as a weapon. "All units confirm ready." Kane's voice was tight, with tension. "On my mark." But Sarah was already moving. Her mother's old tactical gear made her nearly invisible as she slipped through the shadows, positioning herself for what came next. Because here's the truth about predators. They're most vulnerable when they think they've cornered their prey. "Mike," Sarah radioed, "get your people clear of the North Ridge. When this starts, it's going to get loud." Through her enhanced optics, she watched Kane's finger tighten on the detonator. He thought he held the power to destroy Thunder Creek. He was about to learn why Catherine Blackwood had always said, "The mountain itself chooses who stays and who goes." The explosion, when it came, was deafening. Kane's charges detonated in a carefully planned sequence designed to create maximum devastation. But something else was happening, something he hadn't planned for. Sarah's tactical display showed Catherine's defensive system in action. The carefully mapped stress points in the rock were channeling the explosive force, using the mountain's natural structure to control where and how the tunnels collapsed. Through her directional microphone, she caught the moment Kane realized something was wrong. What the hell? This isn't... The collapse pattern is all wrong, but that's exactly what Catherine Blackwood had designed it to do. The explosions weren't destroying the valley. They were sealing off specific tunnels, trapping Kane's extraction vehicles exactly where Sarah needed them. Because here's the thing about understanding the land. While Kane's team had brought the most sophisticated demolition equipment money could buy, they'd never considered that someone might have spent years preparing the mountain itself to become a defensive weapon. Through her thermal imaging, Sarah watched their operation dissolve into chaos. The controlled demolitions had cut off their escape routes, forcing their vehicles into natural bottlenecks that Catherine's surveys had identified years ago. "Federal units, move in now," Sarah heard through her secure channel. The task force had been waiting for exactly this moment, when Kane's own actions would trap his operation in a series of dead ends created by Catherine Blackwood's understanding of the mountain's geology. But Kane wasn't finished. Through her tactical scope, Sarah watched him reach for something else, a secondary detonator, the kind used for charges designed to bring down entire mountainsides. "If I can't have it," his voice carried across the chaos, "no one will." That's when Sarah made her move, because while Kane had been focused on the mountain above, he'd forgotten about the shadows around him. And Catherine Blackwood hadn't just taught her daughter about geology. She taught her about the moment when a predator becomes prey. Thunder Creek Valley was about to show them all why you don't bring explosives to a fight with someone who knows every inch of the ground you're standing on. Because sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't the one that causes the most destruction. It's the one that knows exactly how to use the enemy's own strength against them. The final moments of the battle for Thunder Creek Valley unfolded in a series of calculated moves. As Kane raised the secondary detonator, Sarah emerged from the shadows like a ghost, her mother's tactical training evident in every step. "It's over, Kane," her voice carried across the pre-dawn air. "Your buyers are gone, your systems destroyed. Federal task force is already moving in, but that's not all." Through her enhanced optics, Sarah could see Kane's remaining security teams trying to salvage what they could from the command center. The AI core, their precious weapon, was trapped in the transport vehicle, blocked by the very mountain they'd tried to destroy. Kane's laugh was bitter. "You think you've won? I've got enough charges left to bring down half this valley. Your precious ranch, your father's legacy, all of it goes up in smoke." Through her tactical display, Sarah watched the federal task force moving into position, but they wouldn't reach Kane before he could trigger the charges. This end would come down to just the two of them, a man who thought technology gave him power and a woman who understood that true strength comes from knowing the land you're fighting for. "You made 3 mistakes," Sarah said, moving with deliberate precision. "First, you thought because we're rural, we're simple. Second, you never asked why my mother spent so much time upgrading the valley's infrastructure." Kane's finger tightened on the detonator. "And the third, you never wondered who taught me everything I know about electronic warfare and tactical operations. Because here's the truth about Thunder Creek Valley. While Kane saw Catherine Blackwood as just another local who'd helped modernize the region, he never knew about her real work. Never knew that before settling in Thunder Creek, she'd been one of the NSA's top electronic warfare specialists. Through her directional microphone, Sarah caught the moment understanding dawned in Kane's voice. The power fluctuations, the system. Failures, it wasn't just interference. Mom spent years preparing this valley, Sarah confirmed. Every upgrade, every modification, every seemingly random power issue, all of it designed to protect against people exactly like you. But Kane wasn't finished. His hand moved to his jacket, reaching for what Sarah knew would be a backup weapon. Sweet story, but this ends my way. No one makes fools of us. No one. That's when Sarah triggered her mother's final defense. Throughout the valley, carefully hidden transmitters activated, broadcasting the exact frequencies Catherine had designed years ago. The same frequencies that could trigger specific responses in military-grade equipment. Through her tactical display, Sarah watched the cascade effect. Kane's remaining systems, including his detonator, were suddenly flooded with contradictory signals. The sophisticated military tech they'd relied on was now working against them. "What? What are you doing?" Kane's voice cracked as his equipment began failing. Sarah moved like a shadow, years of training evident in every step. "Teaching you why Mum always said the most dangerous predator isn't the one with the biggest weapons. It's the one who knows how to turn those weapons against their owner." The federal task force arrived to find Kane and his remaining team, already subdued. Their equipment had been rendered useless by Catherine Blackwood's defensive systems. The sophisticated AI weapon they'd tried to demonstrate was trapped in a transport vehicle, sealed in a mountain tunnel that would take weeks to safely clear. But that's not all. As dawn finally broke over Thunder Creek Valley, Sarah stood with her father on their front porch, watching federal agents process the scene. James Blackwood looked at his daughter with new understanding. "Your mother," he said softly. "She didn't just teach you about ranching, did she?" Sarah smiled, thinking of all the lessons Catherine had passed down. Not just about electronic warfare and tactical operations, but about what it truly means to protect what matters. "Mum always said there are 2 kinds of strength," Sarah replied. "The kind that tries to control everything through force, and the kind that knows how to turn that force back on itself. Because here's the final truth about Thunder Creek Valley. While Kane and his team had brought the most advanced military technology money could buy, they never understood what Catherine Blackwood had known all along, that sometimes the best defense isn't about having the most sophisticated weapons. It's about knowing exactly how to make those weapons become their own undoing." Through her father's old binoculars, Sarah watched the federal agents load the last of Kane's team into transport vehicles. The valley was safe. The weapon that could have threatened countless civilian lives was neutralized, and Thunder Creek had taught them all a final lesson about underestimating ranch country. Lucy's voice came through on the radio one last time. "Sarah, honey, your mama would be proud." And as the morning sun painted the mountains in gold, Sarah thought about all the layers of protection Catherine Blackwood had built into this valley. Not just the technical defenses and tactical preparations, but the deeper understanding. The true security comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you're fighting for. Thunder Creek Valley had shown them all why sometimes the most dangerous person isn't the one with the most advanced technology or the biggest operation. It's the one who remembers that every piece of land, every community, every legacy is worth protecting with everything you've got. The rancher's daughter had proven that sometimes the deadliest force isn't the one that tries to control everything. Through brute strength, it's the one that knows exactly how to turn that strength into a weakness. And in doing so, she'd honored not just her mother's legacy, but the spirit of every person who'd ever stood their ground against those who thought power alone was enough to win. Because in the end, that's what Thunder Creek Valley was really about. Not just land or technology or tactical advantage, but the understanding that true strength comes from knowing exactly what you're fighting for, and being willing to use every tool, every lesson, every shadow to protect it. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.